The wallet fell open, spilling a photograph onto the counter. Scarlett froze. The face smiling up at her was one she'd only ever seen in dreams, her mother's. Rain hammered the diner windows, drowning out the sound of her heartbeat. Across the street, the man who'd left it behind a billionaire with ice in his eyes was stepping into a black car, oblivious to what he'd just unleashed. She didn't know his name yet, but he held the key to the mystery that had defined her entire life. And before the night was over, their two worlds, poverty and power, would collide in ways neither could escape. The rain fell on the streets of downtown New York with a relentless, percussive rhythm. Each drop a tiny hammer against the grimy windows of the Gilded Spoon. It was a diner that hadn't seen anything gilded in at least 4 decades. The vinyl on the booth seats was cracked like old leather, and the air hung thick with the ghosts of a million fried breakfasts and the lingering scent of stale coffee. For Scarlett O'Connell, this was the symphony of her life. At 24, she moved through the narrow aisles with an economy of motion born from 6 years of practice, balancing plates of eggs and bacon with a practiced ease that belied the bone-deep weariness in her soul. Her life was a series of calculations. Rent was due on the 1st, the electricity bill a week later. Her community college tuition for the night classes she was taking in business management was a looming mountain she chipped away at with meager tips. She had inherited her mother's fiery red hair, but none of the luck that should have come with it. Her mother, Catherine, was a phantom, a collection of half-whispers from the foster care system, and a single dog-eared photograph Scarlett kept in a shoebox under her bed. The official story was that Catherine had given her up as an infant, unable to care for her. A story Scarlett had recited to herself so many times, it felt like a borrowed memory, not her own. On that particular Tuesday, the lunchtime rush was a chaotic ballet of clattering plates and shouted orders. Scarlett refilled a coffee cup for a retired transit worker named Frank, who was nursing his brew while solving the world's problems in the daily crossword. She smiled, a gesture that didn't quite reach her tired green eyes. It was then that he walked in. He didn't so much enter the Gilded Spoon as the diner seemed to shrink around his presence. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than the diner's monthly revenue. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, and his face was a mask of stern, wealthy indifference. He looked utterly out of place, a hawk in a flock of pigeons. He took a seat in the corner booth, the one with the biggest tear in the vinyl, and placed a sleek black briefcase on the seat beside him. Scarlett felt a flutter of professional anxiety. This wasn't their usual clientele. She grabbed a menu, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked over. "Welcome to the Gilded Spoon," she said, her voice even. "Coffee." The man looked up, and his eyes, a shade of intense, piercing blue, met hers for a moment. They were eyes that assessed, calculated, and dismissed all in one glance. "Just black coffee and a menu, though I doubt I'll be eating." His voice was deep, resonant, and carried an authority that made the air feel heavier. Scarlett slid the menu onto the table. "I'll get that for you." She returned with a steaming mug of the diner's famously bitter coffee. He didn't thank her. He simply stared out the rain-streaked window, lost in a world far removed from peeling linoleum floors and the sizzle of burgers on the griddle. He stayed for nearly an hour, nursing the single cup of coffee, his posture ramrod straight. He made a single phone call, his voice a low, commanding murmur about stock valuations and asset liquidation. Scarlett stayed away, sensing he was a man who valued his solitude. Finally, he stood, placed a crisp $100 bill on the table, a tip that made Scarlett's breath catch, and walked out, disappearing into the gray curtain of rain as quickly as he had appeared. It was Frank who noticed it first. "Hey, Scarlett, your fancy fella left his wallet." Scarlett looked at the corner booth. Lying on the red vinyl, almost blending into the shadows, was a simple, elegant wallet made of dark brown leather. It looked expensive, worn in a way that spoke of years of use, not neglect. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The $100 bill was an anomaly, a gift from a foreign world. But a A wallet was a man's life. I should try to catch him, she stammered, untying her apron. But by the time she got to the door, the street was a blur of yellow cabs and black umbrellas. He was gone. The sleek black car that had undoubtedly been waiting for him had melted into the city's traffic. With a sigh, she returned to the booth and picked up the wallet. It was heavy-made from a leather so soft it felt like silk. The diner's policy was clear. Hold lost items for 24 hours, then turn them over to the police. But her curiosity, a powerful, insistent force, gnawed at her. She just wanted to find a name and ID so she could perhaps call his office. It was the right thing to do. Back in the relative private privacy of the staff break room, a cramped space that smelled of bleach and desperation. She sat down. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the wallet. The first thing she saw were the credit cards, a row of them all black or platinum. The name embossed on them read, Nathaniel A. Sterling. The name meant nothing to her. She thumbed past the cards looking for a driver's license. There was a thick wad of cash. Hundreds, she realized with a jolt. More money than she made in a month. She quickly pushed it aside, her integrity wearing with the sudden sharp pang of her own poverty. She wasn't a thief. She was just trying to find an address. Then she saw it. Tucked into a hidden flap behind the main card slots was a small plastic sleeve. Inside was not a driver's license, but a photograph. It was old. The colors faded to a soft, nostalgic sepia tone. It showed a young woman, maybe 19 or 20, with a cascade of fiery red hair, a spray of freckles across her nose, and a smile so wide and full of life it seemed to burst from the confines of the small picture. She was leaning against an old oak tree, the summer sun filtering through the leaves, dappling her face with light. Scarlett's world stopped. The air left her lungs in a painful rush. The sounds of the diner, the clatter, the shouting, the sizzle faded into a distant, muffled roar. Her vision tunneled until the only thing in existence was the face in the photograph. She knew that face. She knew every line of that smile, every constellation of those freckles. She knew it from the one precious tattered photo she kept hidden away in a shoebox, the photo she kissed goodnight every night. She pulled her phone from her pocket, her fingers fumbling as she swiped to her photo gallery. She brought up the picture she had taken of her own photo, a grainy, scanned image, but the face was unmistakable. She held the phone next to the wallet. It was the same woman, the same vibrant, joyful, beautiful woman. It was Catherine O'Connell. It was her mother. Scarlett gasped, a ragged, choking sound. That's my mom's picture. Why would a man like Nathaniel Sterling, a man who lived in a world of skyscrapers and stock markets, be carrying a faded photograph of her mother, a woman who had supposedly been a penniless single mother who had abandoned her child? 1,000 questions exploded in her mind, each one more bewildering than the last. Who was this man? And what was his connection to the ghost that had haunted her entire life, in that grimy break room surrounded by the mundane artifacts of her struggling existence? Scarlett O'Connell felt the solid ground of her reality crack open, revealing a chasm of mystery so deep she was afraid she would fall right in. The next 24 hours were a blur of torment for Scarlett. She finished her shift in a daze, her hands performing the familiar tasks of clearing tables and pouring coffee, while her mind raced through a labyrinth of impossible scenarios. Was Nathaniel Sterling her father? The thought was a sudden violent shock, a lightning strike to her very identity. She had spent her life as an orphan, a girl sprung from nothing. The idea of having a father, a billionaire father no less, was so far beyond the realm of possibility that it felt like a fever dream. She went home to her tiny fifth-floor walk-up in Queens, the wallet clutched in her bag like a sacred relic. She didn't sleep. Instead, she sat at her small kitchen table. The wallet open before her, the picture of her mother staring up at her. She studied Nathaniel Sterling's name. A quick search on her phone had opened a floodgate of information. Nathaniel A. Sterling wasn't just wealthy, he was a titan of industry, the CEO of Sterling Global, a massive conglomerate with interests in tech finance and real estate. His face, the same stern, impassive one she'd seen in the diner, stared back at her from the covers of Forbes and Fortune. He was a legend, a recluse known for his ruthless business acumen and his intensely private life. There was no mention of a wife or children. The $100 tip suddenly made a different kind of sense. It wasn't generosity. It was pocket change, an afterthought. The chasm between their worlds seemed even wider now. By morning, a cold resolve had settled over her. She couldn't live with the questions. She couldn't go back to her life of quiet acceptance. Not now. The photograph was a key, and she had to find the lock it belonged to. She called the diner and told them she was sick, an act of rebellion that sent a thrill of fear and liberation through her. Then she dressed in the nicest outfit she owned, a simple black dress, slightly faded, and a pair of worn but polished flats. It felt like battle armor. Sterling Tower was a monument of glass and steel that pierced the Manhattan skyline, a testament to the power of the man who worked at its summit. As Scarlett walked into the lobby, she felt like an ant entering a cathedral. The floors were polished marble, the air was cool and smelled faintly of money and ozone, and people in sharp suits moved with a brisk, silent purpose. She approached the front desk, a massive block of white marble manned by a woman whose perfectly styled hair and dismissive expression made Scarlett feel utterly inadequate. "Can I help you?" The receptionist asked, her tone suggesting that she probably couldn't. Scarlett's throat was dry. I need to see Mr. Nathaniel Sterling." The receptionist's eyebrow arched. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's a personal matter. I found something of his wallet." The woman's expression shifted from dismissal to cautious interest. She made a call, her voice a low murmur. After a moment, she hung up. "Mr. Sterling's executive assistant will be down to meet you. Please have a seat." Scarlett sat on a leather couch that was probably worth more than her entire apartment, the wallet feeling like a burning coal in her purse. A few minutes later, a poised woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor approached her. "M. Unell, I'm Helen, Mr. Sterling's assistant. You have his wallet?" Scarlett nodded, her hands trembling as she retrieved it. Helen took it, her expression unreadable. "Thank you for returning this. Mr. Sterling is very grateful. He'd like to offer you a reward for your trouble." "I don't want a reward," Scarlett said, her voice firmer than she expected. "I need to speak with him, just for 5 minutes. It's about something inside the wallet." Helen's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mr. Sterling has a very demanding schedule." "Please," Scarlett insisted, a note of desperation creeping in. "It's important. It's about the photograph." The mention of the photograph seemed to be a magic word. Helen's professional mask wavered for a fraction of a second. She studied Scarlett's face, her red hair, her green eyes. A flicker of something recognition curiosity passed through her gaze. "Wait here," she said, and walked away. The wait was agonizing. Finally, Helen returned. "Mr. Sterling will see you this way." They rode a private elevator, a silent, high-speed ascent that made Scarlett's ears pop. The doors opened directly into a sprawling office that seemed to occupy the entire top floor. The city spread out below them, a breathtaking panorama of concrete and light. The office was minimalist and immaculate, dominated by a massive mahogany desk, and behind it sat Nathaniel Sterling. He looked just as he had in the diner, only more imposing in his own domain. He stood as they entered, his gaze locking onto Scarlett. It was not a warm look. It was intense, searching, and filled with a tension that made the air crackle miss. "O'Connell," he said, his voice the same deep baritone. "Helen tells me you insisted on returning this personally. I appreciate your honesty." He gestured to the wallet which Helen had placed on his desk. "It's not about the wallet, Mr. Sterling," Scarlett said, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "It's about what's inside it." She took a deep breath, steeling herself. This was it. The moment that could change everything or shatter her completely. The picture, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The woman in the photograph. Her name was Catherine O'Connell. She was my mother. The silence that followed was absolute. It was so profound that Scarlett could hear the hum of the building's ventilation system. Nathaniel Sterling's face, which had been a mask of stern control, seemed to crumble. The color drained from his cheeks. His piercing blue eyes widened, and for the first time, Scarlett saw something other than power in them. She saw pain, a deep, ancient grief that stunned her. He slowly sat down in his chair, his movements stiff, as if he were suddenly 100 years old. He stared at her, his ghoul tracing the lines of her face, her hair, her eyes. It was a look of disbelief, of wonder, of profound sorrow. "Catherine's daughter," he murmured, his voice thick with an emotion she couldn't name. Scarlett's own emotions were a tangled mess of hope and fear. She had to ask. The question that had been screaming in her mind for a full day finally clawed its way out. "Are you—" she began, her voice cracking. "Are you my father?" Nathaniel Sterling closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, the raw pain was still there, but it was joined by a deep, heartbreaking regret. He shook his head slowly, a gesture that sent a shard of ice through Scarlett's heart. "No," he said, his voice heavy. "I am not your father." He paused, his gaze drifting towards the window, towards a past that only he could see. He looked back at Scarlett, his expression a storm of complex emotions. "I wish to God that I were," he said, his voice roar. "But I'm not. Catherine. Catherine was the love of my life." The words hung in the air of the vast office, more stunning to Scarlett than if he had claimed paternity. The love of my life. It was a phrase from movies and romance novels, not something she ever expected to hear in connection with her phantom mother. The hope of finding a father vanished, replaced by a million new, more complicated questions. "I don't understand," she said, sinking into one of the plush leather chairs opposite his desk without being invited. Her legs suddenly felt weak. "If you weren't my father, why do you have her picture? Who was she to you? Who was she? All I know is that she gave me up." Nathaniel steepled his fingers, his gaze distant. The ruthless CEO had vanished, replaced by a man adrift in memory. Catherine she was sunlight? He began, his voice softer, now tinged with nostalgia. "We met a long time ago, 25 years. "I wasn't this," he said, gesturing vaguely at the opulent office, the city spread below. "My company was just starting. I was driven ambitious, working 18-hour days. I had no time for anything else." He leaned back, a faint, sad smile touching his lips. "I used to go to a small park downtown to eat my lunch just to see the sun for 15 minutes. She was always there, sketching in a notebook. She was an artist. She saw the world in colors and light that I, with my spreadsheets and projections, was completely blind to." He described their meeting, how he had worked up the courage to speak to her for a week, how her laugh had been the most incredible sound he had ever heard. He spoke of Catherine not as a tragic figure, but as a vibrant, fiercely independent woman. She was passionate about art, poetry, and social justice. She volunteered at a soup kitchen, dreamed of opening a gallery for struggling artists, and argued with him passionately about politics and the soullessness of corporate greed. She challenged me. Nathaniel said, his eyes fixed on Scarlett. She saw through the ambition to the man underneath, and she wasn't impressed by my money, what little I had then. She was impressed by ideas, by passion. She was the best thing that ever happened to him. He painted a picture of a whirlwind romance. Picnics in the park, late-night talks in her tiny walk-up apartment surrounded by canvases, trips to the coast in his beat-up old car. For a year, they were inseparable. Scarlett listened, mesmerized. This was a version of her mother she had never even been able to imagine. The faceless woman from her file had become real, a living, breathing person full of dreams and laughter. She got a scholarship to a prestigious art institute in Paris. Nathaniel continued, his voice growing heavier. It was her dream. I was selfish. I was on the verge of a major breakthrough with my company. I needed to be in New York. I asked her to stay to marry me. He paused, the silence stretching. She said, "No." Scarlett stared at him. "She turned you down." "She told me she couldn't be the wife of a man whose first love was his company. She said I would resent her for holding me back and she would resent me for giving up her dream. She was right, of course. We argued. It was the worst fight of our lives. She left for Paris a week later. I buried myself in my work, determined to become so successful that she would regret her choice. He had built his empire on a foundation of spite and heartbreak. For years he heard nothing. He became the Nathaniel Sterling the world knew, powerful, solitary, untouchable. About a year after she left, he said, his voice dropping, "I got a letter. It was postmarked from a small town in upstate New York, not Paris. She wrote that she had made a terrible mistake, that she loved me and wanted to come back. But she said things were complicated. She was in trouble." His narrative took a darker turn. Catherine hadn't stayed in Paris. She had returned to the States after only a few months. She had reconnected with a man from her past, someone she had known before Nathaniel, a man named Victor Caldwell. Victor was from a wealthy old money family. Nathaniel explained, his expression hardening. He was handsome, charming, and utterly possessive. He had been obsessed with Catherine for years. She had always rebuffed him, but he was persistent. When she was in Paris, lonely and heartbroken after our fight, he showed up. He wore her down with grand gestures. She was vulnerable. She thought she could learn to love him. It had been a disastrous mistake. The charm was a facade for a dark, controlling nature. He was pathologically jealous, isolating her from her friends, criticizing her art, and monitoring her every move. The letter Nathaniel received was a desperate plea. She was trapped. "I was about to go to her," Nathaniel said, his fists clenching on the desk. "I hired a private investigator to find her exact location. But before I could, I received a second letter, a short, curt note. It said she had married Victor and that I was to never contact her again. It was her handwriting, but it wasn't her voice. I knew he had forced her to write it." Shame and regret colored his next words. "I should have gone anyway. I should have fought for her, but my pride was wounded. I told myself she had made her choice. It is the single greatest regret of my life." He didn't hear from her again for over a year. The next time he did, it wasn't a letter. It was a frantic, whispered phone call to his office in the middle of the night. She was terrified. Nathaniel recounted, his voice raspy. She said Victor had become violent. She had to leave. She was pregnant, and she knew without a doubt that the child was not his. Scarlett's breath hitched. "Mine." Nathaniel nodded grimly. "No. She told me she had a brief, desperate affair with another man after a particularly awful fight with Victor. A moment of trying to feel something, anything real. She knew Victor would kill her if he ever found out the child wasn't his, or worse, he would use the child to control her forever. She had a plan to disappear. She asked me for help, not for herself, but to set up a secret fund for her child for when she was old enough. She was going to give you up to keep you safe from him." He had agreed without hesitation, wiring a substantial sum to an anonymous account she specified. That was the last time he ever spoke to her. He honored her wish, not searching for her, believing she had successfully escaped and gone into hiding. The private investigator he had hired years before had found nothing but dead ends. Victor Caldwell's influence had a long reach. "This picture," he said, picking up the wallet and looking at the faded image. "She gave it to me on our first date. I've carried it with me every single day for 25 years. It's the only thing I have left of her." Scarlett felt tears welling in her eyes. Tears for the mother she never knew and the impossible choices she had to make. Her entire life she had believed she was abandoned, unwanted, but the truth was so much more complex. She was given up not out of indifference, but as an act of desperate, protective love. "What happened to her?" Scarlett whispered. "Do you know if she's..." Nathaniel's expression was grim. "I don't know. My investigator's last report about 10 years ago suggested that Victor Caldwell told everyone she had died in a car accident abroad. There was a death certificate and obituary, but the details were always vague. I never believed it. I think he covered his tracks. I think she got away. Or he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. A cold dread seeped into Scarlett's bones. The story had started as a romance and had twisted into something dark and menacing. A man named Victor Caldwell had been the monster in her mother's life. A monster who, for all she knew, was still out there. And now, by walking into this office, she had stepped out of the shadows and into the light. She couldn't help but wonder if the monster had seen her. The story settled over Scarlett like a shroud. The sterile, sunlit office felt cold. The panoramic view of the city suddenly menacing. Her mother hadn't just been a struggling artist. She had been a fugitive running from a man so dangerous she had to sever every tie to her past, including the ultimate one, her own child. This man, Victor Caldwell. Scarlett said, her voice trembling slightly. Who is he now? Where is he? Nathaniel's face was grim, the lines around his mouth deepening. Victor Caldwell is more powerful now than he ever was. After Catherine disappeared, he inherited his family's fortune. He's the head of Caldwell Industries, a major competitor of mine in the tech sector. He's respected philanthropic in public and utterly ruthless in private. The man moves in the highest circles of power both in this city and in Washington. He's not someone you cross lightly. A chill snaked down Scarlett's spine. The faceless villain of her mother's story had a name, a corporation, a place in the world. He was real. For years, Nathaniel continued, his voice low and intense. I've had a team discreetly trying to find any trace of Catherine. Every lead went cold. Every potential witness clammed up. Caldwell's influence is like an invisible wall. The official story remains Catherine Caldwell died tragically. He plays the grieving widower hour to perfection. But you don't believe it. Scarlett stated, more a fact than a question. No, I believe she got away. I have to believe that. I think she created a new identity somewhere far from here, and has lived a quiet life, always looking over her shoulder. Giving you up was the price of that life. It must have broken her heart every single day. The thought was both comforting and devastating. Scarlett was the product of a sacrifice. Her simple, hard Scrabble life had been a shield unknowingly protecting her from a dark and powerful man. Nathaniel leaned forward, his blue eyes locking onto hers with a new, fierce intensity. Scarlett, your walking into my life changes everything. For 23 years you have been safe because you were invisible. You were just another child in the system. But now, you are Catherine's daughter connected to me. If Caldwell were to find out about you, he would see you as a loose end, a threat, or worse, a pawn to be used against me. The implication was terrifyingly clear. Her sudden appearance hadn't just unearthed the past, it had potentially put a target on her back. The world, which had already felt so large and unforgiving, now seemed filled with hidden dangers. What do we do? She asked the question, feeling small and inadequate in the face of such a threat. First, Nathaniel said, his CEO persona resurfacing as he shifted into a mode of command. You are no longer going back to that apartment or that diner. As of this moment, you are under my protection. He pressed a button on his intercom. Helen, please come in. Helen entered, her face as composed as ever, but her eyes held a new flicker of concern as she looked at Scarlett. Helen arranged for the penthouse suite at the Beaumont to be prepared for Ms. Unell indefinitely pack a bag for her with essentials and assembled the security team. I want full round-the-clock protection Tier 1 protocol. She is not to be left alone under any circumstances. Right away, Mr. Sterling, Helen said, her voice crisp. Scarlett was reeling. A penthouse. A security team. Her mind was struggling to catch up with the sudden violent shift in her reality. Wait, I can't just leave my life. My job, my apartment, my classes. Your job paid you minimum wage. Your apartment is a fifth-floor walk-up, and your classes can be taken online or with private tutors. Nathaniel countered not unkindly, but with an unassailable logic. Scarlett, this is not a negotiation. This is about your safety. The life you knew and ended the moment you recognized that photograph. He was right. She knew he was right. There was no going back to worrying about the electric bill when a man like Victor Caldwell might be out there. Over the next few hours, Scarlett's life was systematically dismantled and reassembled by Nathaniel Sterling's formidable machine. A team of discreet professionals packed up her meager belongings from her apartment. Her landlord was paid 3 months' rent for the inconvenience. The manager of the Gilded Spoon was given a call, and a generous severance on Scarlett's behalf, a transaction that probably left him speechless. She was escorted to the Beaumont Hotel, a palace of old-world luxury she had only ever walked past dreaming. Her suite was larger than her entire apartment building floor, with breathtaking views of Central Park. Clothes appeared in the closets, toiletries in the marble bathroom, a laptop and phone on the desk. It was a golden kit, luxurious, but undeniably a cage. A polite, powerfully built man named David introduced himself as the head of her security detail and was now a constant, silent presence outside her door. That evening, Nathaniel met her for dinner in a private dining room in the hotel. The tension between them had softened, replaced by a strange, shared purpose. They were two strangers bound together by the ghost of a woman they both loved. "My team is digging again," he told her over a meal she could barely taste. "They're re-examining everything we know about Victor Caldwell, looking for any new vulnerabilities, and they're looking for Catherine, but this time they're looking for a trail that might lead from you. School records, foster care placements, anything he might be able to trace." He paused, setting down his fork. They found something. Scarlett's heart leapt. "My mother. Know something unsettling. One of Caldwell's chief legal counsels recently made a quiet inquiry into the New York State foster care archives, specifically requesting records from 23 to 25 years ago. The request was flagged by an alert system I put in place years ago." The blood drained from Scarlett's face. "What does that mean?" "It could be a coincidence," Nathaniel said, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it for a second. "Or it could mean he's suspected something for a while. Maybe he never truly believed Catherine was pregnant with his child. Maybe he's been looking for you." The quiet hum of the city outside the window no longer sounded like a lullaby. It sounded like a threat. The shadow of Victor Caldwell, a man she had never met, was stretching long and dark, and she was standing right in the middle of it. She was no longer just a waitress who had found a wallet. She was a secret that was about to be exposed, and she was terrified of what would happen when the light finally hit her. Days turned into a week. Scarlett lived in a state of surreal limbo. She woke up in silk sheets, ate gourmet food, and wore clothes she'd only ever seen in magazines. Yet she felt more trapped than she ever had in her tiny apartment. The security detail was a constant reminder of the invisible threat that dictated her new reality. Her only connection to the outside world was Nathaniel, who visited her daily, bringing updates from his team of investigators. They were learning to navigate their strange new relationship. He wasn't her father, but a paternal protective instinct emanated from him. For Scarlett, who had never had a father figure, it was both comforting and confusing. They spoke for hours, mostly about Catherine. Nathaniel would share memories, and Scarlett would listen, absorbing every detail, trying to build a complete picture of the mother she never knew. She was stubborn, he said one afternoon, a rare smile gracing his lips. Once we argued about a painter, Mark Rothko. I said his work was just lazy blocks of color. She didn't speak to me for 2 days. Then she dragged me to the museum and stood me in front of one of his paintings for an hour, explaining the emotional depth, the layering, the feeling. By the end, I understood. She taught me how to see. These stories were treasures, but they were all filtered through his memory, his love, his grief. Scarlett yearned for something more, something directly from her mother. Her wish was granted on a gray Thursday afternoon. Nathaniel arrived at her suite not with a file of investigative reports, but with a small, ornate silver key. "This belongs to you," he said, placing it in her palm. The key was cool and heavy. "It's for a safe deposit box at a private vault downtown. It was part of the instructions Catherine gave me during that last phone call. The box was to be held until her daughter Scarlett O'Connell came of age, or until I found you. The account it's tied to has been paying the rental fee automatically for 24 years. Scarlett's heart hammered against her ribs. "What's inside, I don't know," Nathaniel admitted. "The box can only be opened by the key holder. She made me promise I would never open it. It was for you and you alone." An hour later, they were in the hushed, climate-controlled basement of a discreet private vault company. The security was immense, requiring biometric scans and multiple signatures. Finally, a guard led them to a wall of gleaming steel boxes. He used his own key in conjunction with Scarlett, and with a soft click, a long, slender metal box was released. Carrying it back to a private viewing room felt like carrying a coffin. Scarlett's hands were shaking so badly she could barely fit the key back into the lock on the box itself. Nathaniel stood back, giving her space. She lifted the lid. The box was not filled with jewels or money. It was filled with her mother's life. On top lay a stack of letters bound in a faded blue ribbon. Beneath them was a thick leather-bound journal, and at the very bottom lay a small velvet pouch. With trembling fingers, Scarlett untied the ribbon and picked up the top letter. The envelope simply said, "For my Scarlett." She opened it. The handwriting was elegant, slanted, and beautifully clear. "My dearest daughter, if you are reading this, it means that Nathaniel has found you. And for that I am more grateful than words can say. It also means that I have failed to come back for you myself. I am so sorry, my love. So profoundly sorry. Know this first and foremost. Giving you up was not a choice. It was a tearing. A piece of my soul was ripped away to ensure that the rest of it, the most important part, you could survive. You were born out of a moment of despair. But you became my single greatest hope. The man you will hear about, Victor, is a cage of a man. He thought he could own me. And when he realized he couldn't own my spirit, he tried to own my future by trapping me with a child. But you were never going to be his. You were always going to be mine. And you are going to be free. I don't know what the future holds for me. I have a plan to escape, to build a new life where he can never find me. My dream is that one day when you are grown and I am safe, I will find you again. I dream of that reunion every single night. Inside this box is my journal. It is my story. It is the truth. It is everything I couldn't tell you in person. Read it. Understand who I was and, by extension, who you are. You come from a line of strong, passionate women. You come from love, not fear. I love you more than the stars in the sky, more than all the colors on my palette. Forever and always, your mother, Catherine. Tears streamed down Scarlett's face, dripping onto the crisp old paper. She looked at Nathaniel, who watched her with a look of profound empathy. For the first time, she felt an undeniable, visceral connection to her mother. This letter was her mother's voice reaching out across a chasm of 24 years. She set the letter aside and picked up the journal. It was heavy, filled with entries. She opened it to a random page in the middle. October 12th. I saw Nathaniel today from across the park. He didn't see me. He looked so serious now. So successful. My heart aches with what I threw away. But he wouldn't be the man he is if he had followed me. And I would have been a shadow of myself. I pray he's happy. I pray he finds someone who can love all of him, not just the part that isn't his work. She flipped to a later entry, the handwriting more frantic. April 5th. Victor knows. I don't know how, but he knows the baby isn't his. The look in his eyes last night, it wasn't anger. It was something colder. The look of a collector whose prized possession is flawed. He said, "We will raise this child as a Caldwell, and it will bind you to me forever. He will never let me go. He will never let my baby go. The plan has to work. I have to run tonight." The journal was a map of her mother's heart, charting her love for Nathaniel, her terror of Victor, and the all-consuming, desperate love she had for the child she was about to give away. Finally, Scarlett reached for the small velvet pouch. She loosened the drawstring and tipped the contents into her palm. It wasn't a piece of jewelry. It was a small, intricately carved wooden bird, a wren. She looked at Nathaniel, a question in her eyes. It was her favorite bird. He said, his voice thick with emotion. She called it the king of all birds because in the old fables it was clever enough to outwit the eagle. She said it was a reminder that cleverness and spirit were more powerful than brute strength. She gave one to me once. I lost it years ago. Scarlett closed her hand around the small bird. It felt warm, as if it still held a trace of her mother's touch. This box contained her inheritance, not money or status, but something far more valuable, the truth. She had her mother's story, her mother's voice, and a symbol of her mother's spirit. She now knew exactly who she was and where she came from. She was the daughter of Catherine O'Connell, a woman who chose cleverness over brute strength. And as the shadow of Victor Caldwell loomed, she realized she would need every ounce of that inherited spirit to survive what was coming. The discovery of the journal changed the atmosphere entirely. It was no longer a story being told to Scarlett. It was a conversation she was having with her mother across time. She spent every waking moment poring over the entries, absorbing Catherine's joys, her fears, her fierce protective love. The journal was also a weapon. Catherine had meticulously, almost prophetically documented Victor's cruelty, his threats, his financial crimes she'd overheard, and his obsession. It was a powder keg of truth waiting for a match. Nathaniel's team, armed with the new information, worked with renewed ferocity. The inquiry into the foster care system had not been a coincidence. It was followed by other subtle probes, feelers put out by Caldwell's security firms checking into old acquaintances of Catherine's hospitals from the time of Scarlett's birth. Victor was hunting. The sense of being watched intensified. One of Scarlett's security guards, David, noticed the same black sedan parked across from the hotel for 3 days in a row. A new, unknown technician tried to gain access to the hotel's security system. These were not overt threats, but the calculated movements of a predator circling its prey. "He's not going to make a clumsy move," Nathaniel said during one of their tense evening meetings. "He won't try a kidnapping. It's too messy. Victor's weapon is control. He'll try to control you legally or financially. He'll try to discredit you, to isolate you from me, to make you seem like a gold-digging fraud." The first move came a week later. Scarlett was served with a cease-and-desist letter from a high-powered law firm representing Victor Caldwell. It was a masterpiece of legal intimidation. It accused her of conspiring with Nathaniel Sterling to extort Mr. E. Caldwell, a grieving widower, by impersonating the long-lost daughter of his deceased wife. It demanded she cease making these defamatory claims immediately, or face a lawsuit that would ruin her. "It's a bluff," Nathaniel said, his eyes blazing with cold fury as he read the letter. "He's testing us. He wants to see if you'll scare." "I'm not scared," Scarlett said, and was surprised to find that it was true. Reading her mother's journal had ignited a fire in her. This was the man who had tormented her mother. He would not do the same to her. "I want to fight him." Nathaniel smiled a grim, wolfish expression. "Good, because we're going to give him a fight he'll never forget." Their strategy was bold. Instead of hiding, they would go on the offensive. Nathaniel's legal team prepared a countersuit, but they needed undeniable proof. The journal was powerful, but Caldwell's lawyers would tear it apart as a forgery. They needed something more, something concrete that tied Scarlett to Catherine. The answer lay in the safe deposit box. Tucked into a hidden pocket of the journal, they found a small sealed envelope they had missed before. Inside was a lock of fiery red baby hair and a hospital birth certificate for a Jane Doe with Catherine O'Connell's signature on the line for the mother. The DNA from the hair would be a perfect match to Scarlett. The trap was sprung not by Victor, but by them. Nathaniel leaked a carefully worded story to a single trusted journalist at the Wall Street Journal. The story was tantalizingly vague. Industrialist Nathaniel Sterling has reportedly located the heir to a significant trust established years ago for the lost child of his former love, the late artist Catherine O'Connell, tragically widowed wife of rival Victor Caldwell. The article was a grenade tossed into Victor Caldwell's carefully curated world. It didn't accuse him of anything directly, but the implication was explosive. It painted him not as a grieving widower, but as a man who had perhaps hidden the existence of his wife's child. Victor, as Nathaniel predicted, overreacted. His ego, his Achilles heel, could not stand the public insinuation. He immediately filed a massive, high-profile defamation lawsuit against both Nathaniel and Scarlett. He called a press conference on the steps of his corporate headquarters, his face a mask of sorrowful indignation. "This is a cruel and opportunistic attack on the memory of my beloved wife," he declared, his voice resonating with false sincerity. "This young woman is a fraud manipulated by a business rival to tarnish my name. My wife Catherine was never pregnant at the time of our marriage. This is a fabrication, and we will prove it in a court of law." It was the mistake they had been waiting for. By declaring so publicly that Catherine had never been pregnant, he had walked directly into their trap. The initial hearing for the lawsuit was a media circus. Victor Caldwell sat at his table looking powerful and aggrieved. Scarlett sat beside Nathaniel, her heart pounding, but her resolve firm. Caldwell's lawyer, a famously aggressive litigator, began his opening statement. "Your Honor, this is a simple case of a malicious fantasy. We have medical records, sworn affidavit from friends and staff, all confirming that Mrs. Catherine Caldwell was never with child during her marriage to my client." When it was their turn, Nathaniel's lawyer, a calm older woman named Ms. Albright, stood up. "Your Honor, we are not here to debate the timeline of Mr. Caldwell's marriage. We are here to establish the identity of my client, Scarlett O'Connell, and we have incontrovertible proof of that identity. She presented the birth certificate. She presented the sworn testimony from the bank about the safe deposit box established by Catherine, and then she delivered the final blow. Furthermore, Your Honor, we have conducted a DNA analysis. The sample was taken from a lock of baby hair preserved by Miss Unell's mother. The results confirm with 99.99% certainty that Scarlett O'Connell is the biological daughter of Catherine O'Connell." A gasp went through the courtroom. Victor Caldwell's face went pale. "But that is not all." Ms. Albright continued, her voice ringing with authority. "Mr. Caldwell has publicly and vehemently denied that his wife was ever pregnant. Which is interesting because this child was not conceived during her marriage to Mr. Caldwell. According to the date on the official birth certificate, Scarlett O'Connell was conceived before Catherine ever married him. The puzzle pieces slammed into place for everyone in the room. If Scarlett wasn't Victor's child and she wasn't Nathaniel's, then who was her father? And why would Victor go to such extreme lengths to deny the existence of a child that wasn't his? The only logical answer was that he had known about the pregnancy all along and had tried to pass the child off as his own to control Catherine. His public denial had just spectacularly backfired. He had purged himself in his own affidavit and exposed his own lie on a national stage. Ms. Albright saved the journal for last. And as for motive, Your Honor, we have this: the personal journal of Catherine O'Connell detailing in her own words Mr. Caldwell's abuse, his controlling nature, and her desperate plan to escape him to save her child's life. The trap had been sprung. Victor Caldwell, the master of control, had lost it completely. His carefully constructed world was collapsing around him in a blaze of public humiliation. He was exposed not as a grieving husband, but as a liar, an abuser, and a monster. Scarlett watched him, not with triumph, but with a cold, quiet finality. This was for her mother. The clever wren had finally outwitted the eagle. The aftermath of the court hearing was a tidal wave that shattered Victor Caldwell's world. His lawsuit was dismissed, and his blatant perjury triggered a criminal investigation. The press turned on him, and Catherine's journal, now public, exposed his abuse to the world. His empire, built on control, crumbled under the weight of the truth. Though the old evidence was insufficient to charge him for what he did to Catherine, he was ultimately convicted on multiple counts of perjury and financial fraud. The shadow that had loomed over Scarlett's life was finally gone. In the quiet months that followed, Scarlett's world transformed. The golden cage of the hotel suite was replaced by a sunlit apartment overlooking the park her mother had loved. She and Nathaniel forged a new kind of family bound by their shared love for Catherine, sharing stories and filling the missing pieces of their lives. The trust fund her mother left gave her freedom. But Scarlett valued legacy over luxury. She enrolled in university to study art history, wanting to build something Catherine would have been proud of. She used the funds to establish the Catherine's Wren Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing grants and gallery space for female artists from underprivileged backgrounds, giving them the chance her mother never had. At the foundation's opening night, Scarlett stood poised and confident, no longer the tired waitress from the Gilded Spoon. Nathaniel stood beside her, whispering how proud Catherine would have been. Looking at the vibrant art and hopeful faces, Scarlett felt a profound peace. Her life had been born from a secret, but by confronting the past, she had found her own truth. She was the daughter of a woman whose spirit, like the clever wren, had ultimately soared free. And now it was Scarlett's turn to fly. The story of Scarlett O'Connell is a powerful reminder that our past never truly leaves us. It is etched into our very being, waiting for a single moment, a dropped wallet, a faded photograph to bring it rushing back. Her journey from a life of hardship and unanswered questions to one of profound truth and purpose shows us the incredible strength of the human spirit. It's a testament to a mother's undying love, a daughter's resilience, and the idea that sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money or power, but the courage to face the truth. If this story of fate, sacrifice, and the enduring bond between a mother and child moved you, please take a moment to show your support. Hit that like button to let us know you enjoyed it, and share this video with someone who appreciates a story where justice in the end prevails. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next tale that proves life is often more dramatic than fiction. Thank you for listening.